In this video, we are going to break down Klaus Schwab's meeting that he had in Indonesia, and we are just going to cover it point by point as he goes through.
In 2010, I proposed to the chair of the G20 at that time, the Korean chairmanship, to integrate a strong business dimension into the deliberations of the G20, because I deeply believe into the multi-stakeholder concept, which means we all have to work together. Corporations, of course, governments, civil society, to address the big issues in our world.
Did you hear what he just said? He said a multi-stakeholder approach. If you don't understand what a multi-stakeholder approach is, it's in his book, The Great Reset. If you read that book, your guts will turn upside down, I tell you. So in this book, he says, a multi-stakeholder approach is an approach whereby we have a group of people that are selected to make decisions for the rest of the country, in this case for the rest of the world. Actually, his argument is for the rest of the world. So when he says he wants us to go to a multi-stakeholder approach, it means that he wants us to elect a certain people that we will dichotomize sovereignty from governments, and they then will be the ones making decisions for everybody else, and everyone else will submit under them. So nations are not going to be, in a sense, as sovereign as we know them. Do you realize how big this thing is? He's saying that they should make decisions for the rest of us. So these leaders are the leaders who are going to be very active to bring about the vision of mystery and the manifestation of mystery Babylon. The Bible calls them kings and merchants that take over the affairs of men to drive them to a place or to a vision that which they want to see, that which they envision. So he's saying we are about to enter into that season where we have to prepare ourselves to be led by a group of elite people who think they know what is best for the rest of us. This is a call for prayer. And let's listen to the second point.
If we look at all the challenges, we can speak about a multi-crisis, an economic, a political, a social, an ecological, an institutional crisis. But actually, what we have to confront is a deep, systemic, and structural restructuring of our world. And this will take some time. And the world will look differently after we have gone through this transition process.
You see, so for him, he says we're in a multi-crisis environment, politically, environmentally, economically. So he calls it a multi-crisis environment. But the Bible calls it the birth pangs. This is what Jesus spoke about when he said the birth pangs. And then he began to mention wars, rumors of wars, famines, diseases. So what Klaus Schwab calls multi-crisis, the Bible calls it the birth pangs. The purpose of the birth pangs is to collapse the old world order so that it can create an environment for the new world order to emerge. So that is why he said what we have to do is to confront a deep, systematic and structural resetting of our world.
What we have to confront is a deep, systemic and structural restructuring of our world. And the world will look differently after we have gone through this transition process.
Did you hear what he said? He said we have to confront a deep, systematic, structural resetting of our world. That's what he said. And then he said the world will look differently after we have gone through this process.
And the world will look differently after we have gone through this transition process.
Did you hear what he just said? The old world order is dying and the new world order is rising. This is a call for prayer. Third point.
Politically, the driving forces for this political transformation, of course, is the transition into a multipolar world, which has a tendency to make our world much more fragmented. And for these reasons, events like this one, the G20, and so on, are the very important connectors to avoid a too great segmentation, I would say, blockisation instead of globalization of our world.
So let me explain what he says here. So he says a multipolarized world makes us fragmented. So a multipolarized world is a multicultural world. It's a world of many opinions. And then he says it makes us fragmented, so it breaks us down. And then he says, what I'm proposing is blockization instead of globalization. Do you know what he means when he says blockization?
I would say blockisation instead of globalization of our world.
So blockization is basically the way countries produce and do import and exports now. He says we're going to change it because this is globalization. It's as if the world is going to run through a district system. If you remember, in the Hunger Games, there used to be different districts. There will be District 1, District 2, District 4. So, and then we will say District 1 must give us coal. District 2 must give us gold. District 3 must give us bread. So now, even if your country produces gold, but if it's in a different district, you will no longer have to produce gold for us. So that is what he means when he says blockalization. He wants to block the world into sections. And what do we know as believers? We know that a person who wants to blockalize the world, who wants to divide the world into sections, is the Antichrist. But obviously, what is happening now is not the Antichrist. This is the preparation of the world of the Antichrist. So he wants to get the world used to a blockalization system.
I would say blockisation instead of globalization of our world.
What it means is that it's going to create an interdependency of nations. So the nations will no longer say we depend on ourselves, but we will all depend on each other and all reporting to those multi-stakeholders or those chosen people who can make decisions for us. So basically that is a picture. That is what he wants to see. And obviously for us, we know that this is the system of Mystery Babylon, who sits on many waters. And he was casting a vision, and he was saying these things are going to start to be implemented next year. So we need to prepare. I mean, now we are not caught by surprise. We know what they want. So please, this is a call for prayer. This is a call for us to really seek God and for us to ask God to help us to live the love of the world and to focus on the kingdom and what God wants. This is a serious time, brethren. This is a time in history. This is a time in history where everything is going to change. This is a time in history where you need to wake up. I need to wake up. When we sit down, I don't expect you to be talking to me about a car. I'm expecting you to be telling me about souls. I'm expecting you to be telling me about where the church is going to escape during this difficult time. This is a time for us to come up, like we like to say.
I would say blockisation instead of globalization of our world.
Next point.
If you look at the economic transformation forces, I just would like to mention four. The energy transition which we need, and where Indonesia is playing a very important role. Second, the reshaping of our supply chains, where Indonesia can play a very important role.
So you see, he says energy transition and reshaping our supply chain. I don't know. For me, I'm wondering, because even the Pope said so. What do they mean when they say we have to transition from coal and gas, and oil? And how is the world going to, how is it going to function? Because for me, I see a recipe for a disaster. They say we ought to transition from fossil fuels, but I think that they want to intentionally cause an unprecedented famine that we've never seen before. And in that way, this famine, it will be a conducive environment for them to introduce this new system of a multi-stakeholder system that he is talking about. Let's listen to the next point.
This all means, at least at the beginning, a cost burden. Now, if you restructure a company, you write off the costs, and of course, the shareholders are suffering. If you restructure an economy, the result is a reduction of income, of disposable income, which can lead to extensive social tensions, which we see in our world developing.
So you see, he said we are restructuring the economy, but he gives an example of a CEO restructuring a company. But the truth of the matter is, we are not restructuring a company here. We are restructuring a global economy. They are restructuring our world. That is why we can wake up one day with the money that you have in the bank, and they will tell you that your money is worth nothing. You're gonna wake up one day, and then they will tell us that you have to submit all your money to the government. So please be prepared to wake up one day and all the money that you have in the bank is worthless. We need to prepare ourselves for that. Remember in my video for what to expect in 2023, when I said, when the money fails, these people are creating an environment where it allows for people to say the money failed, let us sell ourselves over to the government. Please, I beg you, please, when the money fails, when you wake up and they say the money that you have is not worth what you thought it is, do not sell yourself to the government. I'm begging you, please do not sell yourself to the government, because he's not joking when he's saying they are restructuring. This is going to happen, and we need to put our shock absorbers on so that when it happens, we are prepared to deal with it and to handle it. So what I'm essentially saying is that our trust in the institutions, in the banks, in the schools, in the law of the land, our trust in all those set up structures must diminish, and we must set our trust in God. Please, let us stop trusting the government. Let us trust God.
Now, how do we deal with this transition which may last for several years? Not just applying crisis management, not just reacting, but constructing the future with a purpose. We should use this transition time with a clear concept of what we want to achieve, how we want to come out of this transition time. We want to come out as a more sustainable, more resilient, and more inclusive world.
You see, he calls it a transition time. He says this is a transition time. How do we deal with this transition, and how do you want to come out with this transition? And then he says we ourselves have to construct a future that has a purpose. That constructing of the future is done by these multi-stakeholders. So I need you to know the world, where it's going, is going into a future that is constructed by multi-stakeholders. And those stakeholders are the elite that are chosen by I don't know who chooses them, but anyway, the elite that are chosen to make decisions for the rest of us. This is bad news.
And if you look at technological revolutions, it usually goes in the form of an S-curve. And just now, we are at the inflection point to exponential development. And technology will change completely what we are doing at this present time. And not only what we are doing, and that's another change, it will change and it will have an impact on even who we are.
Did you just hear what I just heard? I mean, when I was watching this conference, I stood up. I couldn't even continue anymore. He says technology will change who we are. So if technology is going to change who we are, what does it mean that technology is going to change who we are? In conclusion, this is a time for us to seek God. This is a time for us to lay off everything that distracts us from Yahweh. If you are not close to God, this is going to be a difficult time for you. This is a time for us to clean our altars and to reset our fire on and to look to Yahweh again. He is the only hope. Jesus is the only hope. There is no political movement that is going to stop this. There's no rebel that is going to stop this. It's only Jesus, and no one can stop this. So the only thing that we can do is to hide ourselves under the shadow of the Almighty. God is the only one who can save us from this. God is the only one who can make us go through next year. Is the only one who can make us survive an environment that is called a multi-stakeholder environment. Seek God, seek God, seek God, I beg you. I speak a blessing over your life, and I say, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you in Him. Thank you for watching this video. Shalom, shalom, shalom.